from 78 LPs, vinyl that would break, and then 33 1/3 and 45 CDs, cassettes, and CDs, which are almost outdated now.
Almost. That's generous, I think, to say almost outdated.
I'd still pick up a CD if I like the music.
I don't think I have anything to play it on.
I think our cars still have them. I think new cars still have them.
Yeah.
We have a 2020, but I don't even know if it has a CD drive because I didn't even think to look. I had a DVD I wanted to play a couple of months ago and had no way to do it. No way. What a world.
The good news is you want a DVD player, they're about $18 now.
Yeah, 18 would be the top of the line. 18 would be an expensive one, I think, probably, huh? Oh, what a silly thing we've got going.
Where's my cookie?
Well, it's why is this not working? It's 12:01, so by my clock, it's time to rock here. Rhyme. Gotta love an accidental rhyme. All right. So we should start with our blessing for Torah study. We say Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So our Torah portion this week is one of my favorites. It's got some really good stuff in it, some of which we're going to save for women's Torah study on Thursday, which is in person and very exciting. And but there's so much. There's enough in Sh'lach Lecha to go around. So sometimes this portion is called Sh'lach, and sometimes it's called Sh'lach Lecha. Same thing, same portion. It's just a determination of how many words they decided to use together to designate the name of the portion. Same thing though. So we're gonna look, and I'll put it on the screen in just a moment. So what happens is, where are we? What happened at the end of the last portion? What's happening now? Where are we in the Torah? Does anybody know? Sort of where we're situated? What's happening with the people? They're in the wilderness. We're in the desert, right? We're still hanging.
And they're doing census.
Right, we've had a census. They're starting to settle into our desert life. And what's going to happen in this portion? They're going to send out, they're going to say, well, what's with this promised land business?
Oh, the scouts?
That's what's happening. Margie's got it. That's what's going to happen in this portion. That's what we're going to look at today, right? They're saying, what's happening with this promised land? What is this about? And so they're going to send scouts to go check it out. And that's where we're going to pick up. So let me put, so we're in Numbers 13:25. So this screen is different. This is, talking about the change in technology and how we do things. This is Bible software. There are a couple of different ones. This one's called Accordance. And what's really cool, one of the reasons I like to work within it is when you hover, it's going to give you all this information down at the bottom. And when you have an English app, it's going to highlight how it's translating those words. I'm a data person. I like more data. More data is more better in my world. And so I like having everything up on the screen. So here we are. We're in Numbers 13. We're partway through the Torah portion. So they've sent the spies, the scouts, I think is the word we used. They've sent the scouts out to look at what's happening. And at the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land. And they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Sounds like a great place, right? Sounds like a place we want to go. Does sound like a promised land. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. Okay, so we've got a land flowing with milk and honey, with fruit. They bring in actual fruits, pri haaretz, fruits of the land. What's the problem?
People live there. That's-
Yeah, Margie, I saw your lips move, but there was no sound. There are other people there, and not only other people. What's with these other people?
They're giants.
They're big people. I mean, they're powerful.
They're powerful. They're kind of scary, right? They're not friendly neighbors necessarily, and they're not necessarily the people who want to hang, right? And welcome you to the neighborhood with cookies on the doorstep, right? So how are they feeling looking at these people?
Like they can't defeat them.
Like they can't defeat them. So they're feeling maybe defeated and maybe a little afraid.
A lot afraid.
Intimidated.
Totally.
What, Mark?
Intimidated.
Intimidated. Exactly. There's a contradiction that they found, right? It's look at this beautiful, beautiful place, but there's a really big hurdle to get through. And there's a big stumbling block between here and there. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it." Then the man who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are." Okay, so Caleb says, "We can do this. We can do this." And the other guys are saying, "No, we can't. They're so much stronger than us. What are you talking about?" So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." Okay, so what did they report back to the people? What have they told the people?
Chances are not good for victory.
Doesn't look great.
And they also lied about what's there.
So it's a good question. Is this a lie? Or is this that gray area where you don't lie, but you don't necessarily tell a whole truth? I don't know that they've said anything that's a lie. But they maybe haven't sold it quite so honestly.
Well, I had read in previous summaries that it was because they wanted to keep their own power. The spies told everybody that they were insurmountable, because they wanted to, if they did that, they'd have to give up their businesses to their brethren.
Interesting.
And it's fast. This is after 40 years of wandering around. It almost makes it, why did they wander around for 40 years? They could have gotten this answer back at the golden calf.
Well, and they're about to get there, right? But look at the language they're using. And this translation is very good. Eretz ochelet yoshvea. A land that literally eats. Le'echol is to eat. Ochel is food. It eats up those who dwell there. It's blaming the land, but the land is actually very good, right? They don't have complaints about the Eretz. They have complaints about the Yoshvea, the people who live there, the inhabitants, but they don't have complaints about the land. So maybe it is a lie. Maybe that was fair, Arnie, to say it's a lie, because what have they said about the land? If someone tells you that a land, it devours its inhabitants, it eats up those who live there, what do you think about? What would you think they're talking about? What might you picture?
The Sahara.
A wasteland is, I think, what you said, Margie. The Sahara, right? You think about an inhospitable climate, right? I might say that a land that devours its inhabitants, I don't know, haven't been there, but I'd imagine Antarctica, right? Siberia. Siberia is probably a land that you could say devours its inhabitants, right? Something that's harsh, where there aren't natural resources, maybe, where the climate is a challenge. That's not what they came back and said. They had no complaints. They said, "This is a land flowing with milk and honey. In fact, it's so good. We brought you fruits from that land." And then they say, and then we saw these people, and we are like little grasshoppers that they can crush. But look what they lead with. It's almost like, here's the big problem is the land. And oh, by the way, there are these other people. What's the problem with that presentation? Other than the fact that it's not true.
Out of order. Should have said the other thing first.
Out of order, right? So we've got an ordering issue. There's a fundamental issue with blaming it on the land. Margie, I don't have sound on you, but I see your lips moving.
Really?
Oh, now I have your sound.
Okay. So the land apparently did not devour the sons of Anak. It's,
Right. Okay, great. So there are people living there. So if the land devours the people who live there, then how are those people living there? And what about this land? What's special about this land? God promised this land. So God took us out of Egypt for this. There's my favorite Haggadah. It was written a couple years ago. I think the creators, I want to say, they made one of those shows, I think like South Park or something like that. It's a very funny Haggadah. It's called "For This We Left Egypt." It's irreverent and very sarcastic. I think it's hilarious. It names the Paschal lamb Sally. It's very funny. But they say, "For this we left Egypt." If God took us out of Egypt, let's look, right? So we're slaves. God leads us out of Egypt through this terrifying experience. First, we have these plagues where terrible things happen to people, right? To the Egyptian civilians, terrible things happen to them. They die, they suffer. Takes the Israelites out, horribly scary, right? Terrifying experience, right? Crossing the Red Sea. What do we know? We know that Nachshon ben Aminadav walked into his chin into that water before the sea split. Right? Think of the drama at that moment. The Egyptians are coming for you. The trauma of this experience, you get through it, and then you're in the desert. You're in the damn wilderness, right? Where there's nothing. It says there's a promised land. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And they've been tested, and they've gone through it, and they've wandered, and they've struggled, and they've suffered. And what do they say? The land's no good.
Takes a long time to build up blind faith, doesn't it? 40 years ain't enough.
Now we've got an increasing lack of faith in God, right? Sort of warranted from the people, but they weren't told the full truth. Because if there's an issue with the land, an inhospitable climate, right? A bad land can't be fixed necessarily. But if there's a fight and you believe that God has promised you this land and that it's going to be okay, it's a different kind of intervention. But they've come and they've reported the thing that maybe God can't change, or that God doesn't change. Because if it was a beautiful land, why wouldn't it be that way already? We've got a problem. So what happens? Then all the congregation raised a loud cry. Of course they did. And the people wept that night. Of course they did. And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness? Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? So note, what are they taking issue with? The military conquest. But that's not the whole story, right? Because they were told that this is a problematic land. The Eretz is a problem. It's not just this piece. So they're saying, what, we're going to die for this terrible place? Right? We're going to die for this land that's not even good? This is what we've been brought to? So they're complaining about the military piece, but we have to understand, right? It's not necessarily just that, right? Because of what they've been presented. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to one another, let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt. They're looking at the options. And at some point, I don't know, should we just go back? What's the expression? I can't think of it, right? The devil, you know?
Sure, of course.
Maybe we should go back.
It's called human nature.
Well, and they wanted to choose another leader.
Right? They don't have faith in their leader and they don't have faith in the plan. And when you're given, if you've got two options, right, you're always going to question, did I take, even if it's not going well, you're going to question, did I make the right choice? Right? Does anybody watch American Ninja Warrior? Does anybody watch this show? Matthew and I are so into it. I don't know if do you know what this is? It's an obstacle course competition, like incredible athleticism it requires. And the season opener was last night. And there's a new feature. There's a balanced obstacle. There's always a balanced obstacle. And now they have a choice of which one they take. And they said, the competitors were saying that the hardest part of this is that if they don't make it through that obstacle and they fall, right, and they're out of the competition, they're always going to sit and wonder, did I choose the right one? It's an unforgiving sport because you get one shot every year and you get one run and then you're done. You fall, you're done, right? And one of the guys fell. He made a big scene out of choosing and then he chose and he fell and he said, I guess I should have chosen the other one. But what's funny about that is we don't know that, right? Because he could have fallen on the other route and maybe hurt himself. It could have been worse. But this is what we start to do. We question our decisions when they aren't going the way we want them to go. So they said, maybe we should go back. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe we say enough on this adventure, enough on this, follow a God that doesn't speak to us. Right? I mean, think about their experience of God. What's the experience of God that they have? This guy who used to be Pharaoh's son, he used to be an Egyptian, said, no, God talked to me. I'm actually one of you, and God talks to me. I saw God's face. God talks to me. And God says this is a good idea. We should do this. At some point, you're going to start to question. We know they already did. Look at the golden calf. It happened. We're losing faith, and now they are right up at the edge. They are almost there. And how much faith do you have to have lost to say, we've come all this way, and maybe let's go back and be slaves? Maybe that's a better option. This is a dire place they've reached. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the people of Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes and said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, the land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. You couldn't have said that earlier. The Lord delights in it. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us to this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. What's happening? Joshua and Caleb, what are they saying?
They're
Have
thinking
faith.
going back is worse.
Saying going back is worse. Smarten up, team. Mark, what were you going to say?
Have faith.
Have faith. Say, this is good. This is a good place. This is what God promised us. A land flowing with milk and honey. We got it. It's right there. And they're saying, have faith that God wouldn't do this to us. God wouldn't lead us to the edge of this beautiful land, this incredible land, and say, no, you're going to die here, right? You're going to lose at a military conquest. have faith that God wouldn't do that. But what are they building off of? What kind of faith? Right? At some level, they're asking them for blind faith. Because what kind of proof is there? And so there's a phenomenon, right? So once you've already been told something, even if it's later refuted, it's in your mind that way, right? Said this land eats its inhabitants. It devours its inhabitants. And then later saying, no, it's flowing with milk and honey.
Inhabitants are bread for us. It just seems so black and white, you know.
Well, because I think that room for gray in a group that is already showing some dissension, right? They're not very confident in what's happening and they don't have much faith. And so do you ever read those kids' books? If you give a mouse a cookie, remember these books? If you give a mouse a cookie, probably ask for some milk, right? And then might need a napkin to wipe their mouth. And then they need this. And the whole point of the book is that it's a whole wild goose chase to get the mouse everything the mouse wants, right? Because if you give a mouse a cookie, he'll probably ask for some milk. And then this thing, and then this, and then this, and then this. And so when you leave a little bit of gray area, we've got a problem with someone who's you give an inch, you take a mile. And so they're trying to say, no, it is black and white. It is very clear. The land isn't going to devour us. We'll devour the fruit of the land, and we'll devour the people who live there. There's a strong metaphor they're using here. I mean, very clearly, right?
It raises the bigger question about blind faith. I mean, these folks are a lot closer to miracles, okay? I mean, they've watched an ocean open up. They've watched manna from heaven. I mean, I got to admit that if they could not respond to this. Now, the theory is they've been stripped of all their slavery because it's a whole new generation, yet they're doubting the miracle. Kind of makes you wonder about how do you develop, or should you develop, blind faith in our day and age? I mean, we're still thinking about a split seed from 3,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago. So it raises a bigger issue. I mean, and I think it's just supporting how man himself to develop blind faith is a tough haul. I got to admit, one thing when you're reading this, Golda Meir is quoted. You know that famous quote where she says, "I don't know about Moses. Here he led us around for 40 years, took us to the only place in the Middle East that didn't have oil." So it's kind of, I don't know, just a thought.
I love Golda Meir. I love her so. I was just at Sinai. I almost taught from my office, and right behind what you see in that office view is a portrait of her by Hanoch Pippin. He's an Israeli artist, and he makes portraits out of found objects. And so Golda's face is a challah dough, and her hair is steel wool, and her nose is a chicken wing. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed it behind me when I've zoomed from my office. But Golda Meir, I'll show you here. I pulled it up. This is her portrait. This is the portrait that's in my office.
Oh my gosh. And she's on a shoe.
Not very flattering.
I don't know where it went. No, it's not very flattering, but his portraits are really, so there's Obama. I mean, he does really cool stuff. So Matthew got me that for my ordination because I still love Golda Meir. Just what a brute force. We've got an issue. We've got an issue of blind faith. Absolutely. Golda tangent notwithstanding. Hi, Janet. It's nice to see you. I had the screen share on. I didn't even know you were here. We've got an issue of blind faith. Is blind faith good? Margie's eyes got big.
Sometimes.
That's what they're asking for, essentially, right? At some point, so think about a friendship, right? Everybody's got a friend where they've let you down over and over, right? And then you sort of make up a little, right? Or relationships, at some point we call them abusive, I suppose, right? Where they let you down and then say, well, it's going to be better. It's going to be better this time. And then again, and then again, and again. At some point, I can't tell you, I said this 7 times in the last week alone, probably. At some point, you have to deal with the data that's in front of you. I think. And how does that work when you get to God?
But today we tend to condemn blind faith that hurts other people. I mean, they're describing what they're calling for is a jihadist. Go in there and kill. I mean, they're not exactly, we're going to negotiate for this land. I mean, we're going to go in and kill. I mean, and yet we condemn the jihadists.
Yeah. Well, and I think I've shared some of this before. The sort of lines and boundaries of theology that I have come to in work with a lot of conversion students is I have 2 rules about theology, 2 measurements. I said, your theology needs to be healthy. What are the things that would make it unhealthy? I've got 2. 1, it can cause harm to you or to others. So what am I thinking of? Those who've said in the last year, I don't need to wear a mask. God will keep me safe from COVID. Has potential to harm to yourself and to others. Mm-hmm. Category number 2, if your theology gets in the way of normal and appropriate emotional processes and behaviors, it's unhealthy. So what is that? When I was in chaplaincy, it's always the example I go to. The first death I was part of, my first night on call of the entire experience, my first night on call, 3 a.m., I get a call. I get a page. 37-year-old man is in the ER. He was a heroin addict. He'd been clean for 11 months. He relapsed and he overdosed. And they called. And I got there. I mean, it was Ohio, center of the opioid epidemic. And I got to the hospital and I came into the room, and his mother, they were, I believe, Baptist. His mother was on the phone with the woman from church, off and on, her sort of assigned church support group person. And when her son passed, because he did die, she got on the phone with her. And this woman from the church said to this mother who's sitting at her dead 37-year-old's bedside and says, you don't get to be sad. You have to be grateful to God that you had him as long. God let you have him. He was on loan from God, and you have to be grateful for God. You got to have him for this long. You don't get to be sad. That is an unhealthy theology because it interferes with appropriate and normal emotional behaviors and processes. Does it cause harm to me, to myself, or to others? Does it get in the way? Those are my only 2 hard lines. I think anything else, and I'm happy to be disproved and need to amend it at some point in time. But where I stand now, I think anything else goes within theology. I think it is really hard to believe in God. It can be. For some people, it's really easy, and I envy that because it's certainly not me. But I know that within my own theology, to believe in God, and I need to believe in God, I need that for myself. I know that within my own theology, I need to have enough space, right? I need to make enough room to have some flexibility. And so those are the hard lines. The question is, what does blind faith mean? And does blind faith interfere with those? Or does blind faith offer a source of comfort without harming anyone or anything?
But yet without harming, nothing changes. There's the dilemma. In the book club that Margie and I belong to, we reviewed a book where first, basically, the guy was just describing history. Each case, he tacked it to Christianity. Am I quoting that right, Margie? Where he was kind of saying that because Columbus was a Christian, then he could go in and kill the heathens. They marched across Europe killing in the name of God. And the final one, which is absolutely, to me, astounding, because there's a great movie called God on Trial. Highly recommend to people. Out of Auschwitz. It's a story in Auschwitz where lawyers are debating to put God on trial. And one of the witnesses said, look, I'm on this railroad car. I'm looking through the slit. And I see an SS guard standing in front of me. And I never knew this. The SS on their buckle had God is with us. So it makes you wonder, are these totally distorted? I mean, obviously, I think man shapes God the way he wants to. And I don't know how you contain it. But if occurred repeatedly during history. Somehow it legitimizes it if it's a name of God.
To me, that's error.
But I think that goes back to what you were saying, Rabbi, too, about, the Christian perspective that people are just on loan and that they've died and gone to a better place. I think for some people that's very comforting, that it is a better place because they believe that being with God is better. So I'm not sure that that's harmful. I'm not sure that it was harmful to that mother. It didn't let her do the grieving the way that you wanted her to do the grieving, but it may have let her do the grieving the way that her community would comfort her.
Here's the difference, I think. I think you can say he's in a better place, he's with God, and that brings me some comfort. I'm sad that he's not with me anymore. The problem was you don't get to be sad. You can't be sad, you have to be grateful to God. That was my problem. Right? As opposed to, I believe he's in a better place. He's with God, he's with Jesus, and that brings me comfort. I'm sad that I don't have him anymore. The reality is that and we've got this backed up through psychology, right? Things that inhibit ability to grieve are not good psychologically for us, right?
But I think you're making an assumption based on your observations that they're not allowed to grieve. And that, I'm not saying that they have the answer because I don't look at the world the way that they do, but I think it's really easy to judge when you're not a participant in.
I totally agree. If that's what her community has developed over years, remember, these practices don't develop unless they work. And I'd never judge another, as long as it hurts, it doesn't hurt anymore. In other words, if in their practices says go kill a Jew, I go, hold on a minute. You see what I mean? But if that's what's helping, I've seen that so many times in my practice over 40 years. Remember, trauma and bad burns. And I agree with Janet.
For me, it's a wider view of what hurts someone, right? And I have concern I believe it to be unhealthy, right? To not have sadness in the loss of a death, to say you don't
From your worldview it is, but that isn't everybody's.
Second the motion.
Is all I'm saying. I agree with you. And I think that there can be other ways of looking at the world, and that we're learning that more and more every day, how by looking at it our way is not the only way.
Certainly not. And I think that there are a lot of ways to grieve. I think some of which are backed up by science and psychology, which is where I'm standing. Margie, you.
So I agree with you. And I have a dear friend who lost a child early. I think he was a young teen, and got those
Margie, it's really hard to hear you.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I'm not sure what's going on. Let's see.
That's a little better, but.
Oh, my volume was down. Is that better?
I think that's for you to receive.
Yeah. So it's not better.
Just speak loudly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Oh, yeah. Anyway, my friend got very similar messages from the Christian community she belonged to. And it led her actually eventually to convert to Judaism. And I think it was very much a wake-up call about the truth and reality of life and how Judaism met it where it is, psychologically, emotionally. And she would just obviously felt very failed and angry at the Christian responses.
That is exactly the right thing to do, is to find a different way.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying
when half of that community quits that church, they're going to readjust their practices.
Right.
Pure and simple. The fact that she's the odd man out implies that in that community, it's still working.
Which we can call evolution. And we certainly have it in Judaism as well, because I think there's spiritual and emotional evolution. But I don't know I like your two boundaries for the theology.
You know, listen, I think at the end of the day, we're all a product of our experiences, which fuel our beliefs, right?
Mhm.
And so that's where we land. This is what I believe is unhealthy within theology, right? These are the things that I think are unhealthy theologies that don't serve necessarily, that serve a purpose, but I worry about emotional and mental well-being. That's where I am. My experiences have led me there. Those are the pieces that I think about. And that's my definition of unhealthy theology. Those are the lines for me, right? And watching the experiences that we all have, right? So sitting in that hospital room, that experience, right? And the conversations that ensued, those are some of the foundational things that lead me to a place that I feel that was unhealthy theology. Right? As all of our experiences get there, and certainly we've all got different ones, and it lands us there. Those are the rules for me. And so as my theology grows and changes and fluxes and ebbs and flows, those are the barometers that I use. And those are the checks and balances that I have in place that I look at and say, okay, am I within bounds here? Right? So like when my grandmother died, my bubby, was very, very close with her, very, very close, as was my mother. And my grandfather had died 20 years before her. She died at 95. He died at 72. She lived a lot of years alone without him. And it brought my mother great comfort in the wake of her loss to say, she's with daddy. She kept saying to me, Mom's with dad. She's with daddy and they're having a drink and she's telling him about everything he missed. She's filling him in. And when she first said that to me, she almost said it sheepishly and was like sort of embarrassed or questioning if that was like an okay Jewish thing to say, right? And I said, Mom, that brings you comfort and it because zero harm. Wonderful. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. If that is an image that helps you take the next step forward in grieving the loss of your mother, right? It helps you find a little bit of comfort, a little bit of positive, a little bit of soothing. Wonderful, because it doesn't hurt you, right?
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm still incognito here. Trust me, you don't want to really see me right now. When my father was dying, at one point we were visiting him and it was getting toward the end. And all of a sudden we discovered that it was just him and me in the house. And I thought, oh, a bunch of chickens. What they wanted me to do was say, okay, what do you want for your funeral and this, that, and the other. So we started talking and he mentioned he'll be looking forward to not being in any pain anymore. And we talked some more and I said, well, think about it. Maybe you because my father was a trumpet player. And I said, well, maybe you and Louis Armstrong, his all-time ever favorite in the world, can do a little jam session when we get there. I said, you can watch him all you want and you don't have to pay to get in to see him, I was trying to cheer him up. And he kind of smiled and he goes, okay. So fast forward to where I'm at his deathbed. And I mean, we're literally minutes away and my father can't talk. But all of a sudden I see his hand go up and his fingers are moving. And I couldn't quite understand until later what he was trying to tell me is that he was warming up to play with Louis Armstrong on that. And, it just after when it hit me, it was a comfort to know that he knew I was there because he couldn't talk, couldn't open his eyes, anything. So I had no idea if he knew I was there or not. And it gave me some comfort, and I think I gave him some comfort that he could still kind of joke around about it, so close to his own death. But I don't know. I think if there's a way he could be out there, jamming with Louis Armstrong, he would be. But yeah, that goes against my faith. It goes against being Jewish. But I wanted to comfort my father, and he knew that it was probably a bunch of BS anyway about life after death, or that's how he felt, but it made him feel better. and all that. So sometimes you just have to go with what's going on.
And I think you raised something important, Kathy, in examining the way we got here was talking about blind faith, and is blind faith good, right? And these two parameters that I have are actually intended to do sort of the opposite of what I think we've done with them, right? They're intended to make more space, right? More space within your theology and more space to believe in God, right? And for a relationship with God to have value and meaning in your life and maybe comfort. That's the goal, right? By having two pretty far out parameters, right? To have some kind of definition there, but it makes more room is the hope, right? And that's the response. I'm working with conversion students. We converted 8 Jews last week here in Denver. It was very exciting. And 2 of them were my candidates. And one of them talked about that in his Beit Din, in his conversion conversation, was about using those two pieces, and hearing that those were the only rules opened up far beyond what he understood God could be, right? And made a way for him to believe in God, which is not, self-aggrandizing. I'm not looking for an award or, a pat on the back here because I offered these 2 pieces. That's not the point. The point is, right, that making a little more room by defining very, very loosely what's healthy within a theology makes more room to believe in God. The question, I think, is blind faith healthy? Does blind faith, even if I think where we're disagreeing is less on those 2 principles and more so on the application of them, right? And does it come with an inherent judgment call, which it certainly does, right? Everything we do comes with a judgment and a values-based proposition. So is blind faith, does it have potential to cause harm, either physical or emotional, right? Is blind faith healthy?
It definitely has the potential to cause that. I'm not sure it does it every time.
I tell you, I attended what was the scariest thing in my life. One of my patients, in their church, a kid died, and I was there for the funeral. This is like a little kid, and the preacher was preaching about the fact that God does not do anything without a reason. So this kid had to have sinned. And I just stood there like, oh, but guess what? No one in the congregation, that was their culture. Did it hurt anybody? I don't know. If half of the congregation went and signed up with the rabbi, I think they would reconsider. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody, I'm not judgmental at all. That's why I'm saying. And I think that having the options, somebody who's hit that wall will come search you out, and you can present to them the Jewish way of approaching this. And I hope he goes sees a priest and sees what the priest's got to say. And somewhere he'll find balance for himself. Judgmental itself, I lost that way back.
And to be clear, it's not that I think, the Jews have cracked the God code, right? Because I think that there are a lot of Jews who probably ascribe to unhealthy theologies, especially in ultra-Orthodox communities, right? The narrative that gets put forward is often really unhealthy and can be really damaging to a sense of self, to a sense of self-worth, to a sense of right and wrong. It can be damaging. And it's got to be through your own view, right? Here are sort of the parameters that here's what I think is damaging or causing harm. Might be different from what someone else does, but that's sort of the name of the game here. You got to determine what are the lines, right? And if it's not suiting someone else, great. They can try and seek something else to find it out. And if it's outside of the parameters, I know it's not right for me. But you have to set them, right? And you have to make some kind of judgment call. I think judgment is a word that gets a really bad rap, right? Judgment we talk about like it's an inherently exclusively negative thing. And I don't think it is. Judgment often keeps us safe. We judge situations, make judgment calls to help keep us safe all the time, right? We assess a situation. When you look and you see the stove, the coils are red, we make a judgment, right? About if it's safe to touch. It's effectively what we're doing, right? So judging how we're engaging with our world is often really helpful and healthy and positive, can be positive. There's also plenty of judgment that's not good, right? We're sitting back and we're making all kinds of value statements about other people, right? There's certainly the negative side, but there are judgments that are good and help us get through the world and keep ourselves safe, both physically and emotionally. It's not always a bad thing, judging. Right? Jewish tradition says judge others favorably. I think that's really important, right? Give people the benefit of the doubt, right? When in doubt, assume good intent, right? Someone says something that doesn't feel so great to you, right? That feels kind of nasty. You can say, okay, well, how could I judge them favorably, right? How could I assume good intent? How could I parse this out to understand it in a different way? Right? There's rooms for all different flavors of judgment. My push is that I don't think it's inherently negative judgment. I think that there is positive value to it. So we've got this blind faith issue. We did have a text here at one point in time. So what happens? Joshua and Caleb say, this land, it's a good land. It's good. But if the Lord delights in us, im chafetz banu, the Lord delights in us, he'll bring us into this land, saying, this is not the time. This is not the time to doubt God. All the more so it's the time to believe in God. Because if we believe in God, God will find favor in us and God will make this happen. They're using the same, almost using the same rationale to argue two different points. This is insurmountable, so we should turn back and go back to Egypt. This is insurmountable, so we should believe in God, that God will carry us through. But how do you have this faith in God when you don't necessarily believe? They've wandered for 40 years. I don't know that I could do it. I don't know that I'd be buying into it anymore. Big ask. You're up against a massive, massive wall. You see no way to get over it. This is the moment where you believe in God more, as opposed to believing in God less. And I think that this position they find themselves in really highlights sort of a fundamental difference in theology. And not that I think has any judgment value on it, that it, whether healthy or not even looking at here. I think that there are two distinctly different approaches to theology, right? When stuff gets hard, are you angry with God, or do you find comfort in God? Two really different approaches. I think I've shared this before. A man who was a part of one of the communities I was a student rabbi in, a Christian man who, long story, sort of how he ended up with us. The smaller communities often end up with an interesting cast of characters. A very sweet man, and he told me one day about how he came to find faith, and it was that his I think 19-year-old son was killed by a drunk driver, and he said, I had two choices. I could be angry with God, or I could be soft on God and lean into God. He said, and I didn't have the strength to be angry. I think about him all the time when I think about theology. Because what's the goal of believing in God? Oh, I didn't have sound on you, Arnold.
Comfort. It's a question that Kushner asks in it. And bad things happen to good people. Comfort is the end point. So I think people will approach it in a variety of ways. As it hurts at no one, gesundheit.
Right. So, sometimes you need a place to put anger. 2 weeks ago, my place to put some anger was the customer service department at the Subaru dealership. right? I'd had quite a week with them and I was done. And I had some leftover anger, I had some excess elsewhere. That's where it went, right? Sometimes we need a place to put anger. And so that serves a function. And sometimes we need a soft place to land, which also serves a function. And one of the beautiful things about Judaism and Jewish belief is that we are non-dogmatic, right? We don't say God is this. This is why we have so much ink spilled, right? About Jewish theology and understanding God. And certainly there's plenty of theological conversation within other traditions. I think one of the things that I think is a privilege of living a Jewish life is that there's more room in how we connect with God because there's less prescribed to it. Right. I think there's more space available to struggle through. How do I believe in God? What do I believe about God? And what do I need God to be for me? Who do I need God to be for me? And the flexibility to say, what do I need from God in this moment? Because that may be different from what I needed 10 years ago or what I'll need 10 years from now. And I think that's an unbelievable gift of Judaism. Right. And it's so interesting. When I was reading this portion this week, it's only Tuesday, I guess. It's not very far into the week. Who knew? But as I was reading this portion in preparation for today, that was so struck me, right? That you can use the same rationale to make two different arguments. And with God, I think that theology has its own set of rules. And I think you can really reasonably go in either of those directions. Right? Maybe I'm the only one. I see both sides on this. I get how you end up in this position and you say, this is insurmountable. I'm not believing in God anymore. God wouldn't put me here. Or this is insurmountable. Of course, I believe in God who will carry me through it.
Or going back to Egypt sounds worse than trying something new.
Yeah. It's a difficult position they're put in.
I think it even becomes, it's also difficult because we don't get the message from God to tell us to do different things. And we question all the messages that we do receive. And I keep on thinking about what's going on in Israel and Hamas and the Israelis. And a friend of mine was saying, maybe God is tired of giving us the land. Maybe the message is that it's time to figure out a peace so that everybody can live on the land in peace. And that all of these promises, we interpreted them one way, and maybe it's really a different way. And I don't know that I'd go that far, but I think the reality is that when we blame our actions or say our actions are based on an act of God, we fall into a problem.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the most interesting kind of, I call it not experiment, but what social thing that occurred, if you want to see this in its really spotlight format, is what happened to Jews that survived the Holocaust. I mean, and you wonder, like, people have lost their families and everything else. And there's a lot written on in interviewing these folks, etc. And you think that the crisis of faith phenomenon, all right, and I've known Montreal had a very large Holocaust survivor population, and go to Washington, go to the Holocaust Museum and delve into it there even. You think that it would be like a 90% crisis of faith. Like, how could there be a God to let this happen? And particularly if it happened to you. But yet it's interesting because, religion and faith is a very powerful soother and a prize meeting. It's kind of like Lenin, Marx says, it's the opiate of the masses. So again, like I said, as long as your response doesn't hurt anybody, that's where I draw the line. And I think that's reasonable. And I never ever evaluate how somebody's responding based on its faith, unless it hurts somebody. I don't know. Anybody here who had personal contact with the Holocaust? Did that increase or decrease your faith? I mean, I'm curious.
No change.
See, so you're actually in the majority, Mark. I mean, really in the vast majority. And doesn't that surprise you?
There's a book about this exclusively. It's called Breaking the Tablets. It's about Holocaust theology specifically, because it is such an interesting topic. And it's really like I see it as a more specific version of the why do bad things happen to good people conversation, right? It's the same kind of theological issue. And one of the challenges, I think, you can't make any assumptions in here. And so, Janet, you're talking about a God who's very involved, sort of practically, right? I don't believe in a God that's involved on that level, right? I don't think God makes decisions about, who gets the land of Israel. I don't believe that God is involved in our world on that kind of level. I don't think God decides, whose cells become cancer. I don't believe in a God who does that because I can't. If that's the stipulation, is that God is involved in the world in that way, I can't believe in a God who does that. I can't believe in a God who gives people cancer. I just can't do it. And so my theology has had to first of all, I had to get comfortable with that statement, right? To then be able to build to a place where my theology could offer comfort and support, and have a reasonable amount of consistency that I could believe in God and find a way to believe in a God who isn't involved in that kind of way, but is in a God who doesn't do bad things. But I believe that, the blessings, I think bad things happen in the world. I think they just happen. And I think the place where God comes in is that God gives you the blessings in your life that help you deal with those things, right? Like your family. God has blessed me with incredible people around me so that when difficult things happen, that's a blessing. And that's a blessing from God. But God didn't make the bad things happen. I can't believe in a God who does that. And so I struggled with this for years. And finally I said, what the hell am I doing? So, okay, God doesn't do that. Don't believe in a God who does that. Find a way, because believing in God was important to me and I needed it. And so you find a different way. You find a different path through.
You'd make a great chaplain in my burn trauma center. Trust me. I mean, it was interesting because I introduced that into the University of South Alabama, which is a state institution. This did not exactly meet with raving reviews, but that's exactly what you have to do. It's go in and flexible in terms of who you were interfacing with.
Yeah.
And provide comfort. And that is a talent. And, unfortunately, you chose this profession. So you've got to be a lot more flexible than we do.
The chaplaincy experience was incredibly foundational in my theology. Had a major role was my experience through chaplaincy, because you, especially doing it in Appalachia, essentially, that changes how you relate to the world, for sure. Powerful experience. Powerful. So as always, no big conclusions. Right. Just more things to think about and sort of wrestle with about the ways that we relate to God. And specifically, I came out of reading Sh'lach this year, feeling a lot of sympathy and empathy for struggling with God, and feeling like that has even more so, that has long been our tradition, right? Yisrael, we are the people who struggle with God. And that was really what I was feeling in this portion this year. And maybe next year you feel differently, right? Every year it hits you differently, but that definitely struck me this year. And I do wonder, and most of the time believe, that there's value in that struggle, and that we get more out of it, and that that's the reason to walk towards it and engage, as opposed to run in the other direction.
Agreed.
So there we go. That's what I've got. Thank you, everyone, for engaging in this topic and being open and challenging, and as always, respectful and sacred dialogue is really important. So thank you. We've got Lunch and Learn on Thursday. It's also me. So you're stuck with one more with me. So Lunch and Learn on Thursday, and then Thursday night is Women's Torah Study in person, which is very exciting. So if you want to come, or someone who wants to come, let me know. We've got a forum. We've got a lot of people who've responded. It's very exciting. I think we've got about 20 plus people coming already. So we are going to figure this outdoor class thing out, and onwards and upwards.
The outdoor on Thursday? Oh, okay.
You're not zooming it? You're not zooming it. My wife asked.
No.
No, we are going to be in person only.
Okay.
She signed up.
Yeah, I'm not, I better make sure she understands. It's at the shul.
Yes.
Oh, she knows. Sorry, I just read the background.
I was pretty
Never
sure
mind.
she's with it. She knows what's happening. I saw her response on the form. So yes, we will be in person only, and this is our tester to figure out what that looks like. And it should be a beautiful evening on Thursday. So I think the weather's going to cooperate, and it'll be lovely. And
All right. Tell
there we-
Joanne I'll see her then.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.